The Buffalo Bills have signed safety Mike Edwards. Who is he? What does he bring to the table? And how does he factor into this defense? We're going to explore all of that today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, the Buffalo Bills have made an addition to their roster, signing safety Mike Edwards. So on this episode, we're going to break down Mike Edwards. We're going to talk about who he is. I studied the film on him, and so I have plenty of takeaways to share about the player I watched on tape. And then I want to discuss how he fits into this Buffalo Bills defense in 2024. So let's get acquainted with the newest member of the Buffalo Bills, safety Mike Edwards, who signed a one-year deal with the Bills. We do not have the terms of that contract at this point. Mike Edwards is 27 years old. He turns 28 in May and is a native of Cincinnati, Ohio. 5'10" and a half, 205 pounds, 30 7/8 inch arms, 9 3/8 inch hands. So a very dense frame and modest length. Has a relative athleticism score of a 7.48. Again, a perfect score is a 10. And so Mike Edwards, more of an average athlete, not a plus athlete. Was a 2019 third-round pick, number 99 overall, out of Kentucky by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And at Kentucky, he had a heck of a career, 44-game starter for the Wildcats. And in those 44 games, 33 pass breakups, 10 interceptions, and was also a 2-year team captain. Spent the first 4 seasons of his NFL career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who drafted him in the 3rd round. And in those 4 seasons, he started 58 games, he played in 58 games, started 23 of them. And so was never a full-time starter outside of like the 2021 season where he started 12 of 13 games. But even when he didn't start, he factored into the defense. Tampa would play a fair amount of 3 safety looks, and he would come onto the field. And then if he had a few stretches where he was a starter, a few spot starts, and then again, 2021, 12 of 13 starts. But a guy that factored in. He played a fair amount of football, even if he wasn't the starter, and he was part of the Buccaneers Super Bowl winning team in the 2020 season when Tom Brady was their quarterback. So he completes his rookie deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he signed a 1-year deal last season to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he was their 3rd safety, and their starters are Justin Reed and Brian Cook. Justin Reed is a veteran that they're paying big money to. And then Brian Cook was a recent draft pick out of Cincinnati that was their 3rd safety as a rookie and became a starter for them in 2023. And so Mike Edwards in 2023 for Kansas City started off as that third safety. And again, Kansas City's a team that will play 3 safety. So even though he didn't start, he played a fair amount in sub packages. And then Brian Cook got injured with 5 games left to go in the regular season, and Mike Edwards got a chance to start the last 5 regular season games for Kansas City, and then the playoff stretch, he started those games as well and won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. So he's won a couple Super Bowls. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion, one with the Bucs, one with the Kansas City Chiefs. And for his career, he has played in 75 games with 28 starts, has collected 8 interceptions, 26 pass breakups, 5 fumble recoveries, 3 sacks, and 9 tackles for loss. So a fair amount of splash production for a guy that has been a starter, but also really more or less a third safety for the majority of his career. He's got a lot of production. And even in the playoffs, he has 3 playoff interceptions and 7 pass breakups in 11 games. So a guy that, whether he's starting or not, finds ways to make plays. And that's something that really stood out to me when studying his film. And so now that we're acquainted with who Mike Edwards is, I'm next going to talk about the player that I watched on film, and then I want to discuss his role for the Buffalo Bills in 2024. So be sure to stick with me. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 that you can use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they tear down the nets. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. How is your social battery right now? Are you drained, bursting with energy? What's the right amount of socializing for you? And how do you recharge? Maybe you thrive around people, or maybe you need more time alone. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery. Therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for people who've experienced major trauma. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. That'll get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So the Buffalo Bills signed Mike Edwards on Wednesday afternoon. And so I got into the film and I started to learn about who this player is more in depth. I've obviously been acquainted with Mike Edwards. I've followed his career. I studied him at Kentucky, but I wanted to get a fresh look at his skill set so I can discuss it with you here on this podcast. And so I mostly want to focus in on what really stood out to me about who he is as a player. And there's a lot that stood out to me. I would say, first of all, he's instinctive. He's a very instinctive player that is where he is supposed to be. And that's important. Safeties have to be smart. They have to stay leveraged. And if you make mistakes as a safety, that can be catastrophic for a defense. Mike Edwards is a smart football player that is where he is supposed to be. I like his ability to see what's unfolding in front of him and trigger downhill. I like how he processes route combinations and coverage and stays over top, even when he has to exchange routes and squeeze routes, pass off routes. He's a good communicator that anticipates and is where he's supposed to be in coverage. The game just never really looks fast for him. He is a smooth and controlled operator. And those are good things, right? You don't want to watch a player that's frenetic, a guy that feels like they're drinking through a fire hose out there. You don't get that impression with Mike Edwards. He's a very poised player that's where he's supposed to be. I thought Mike Edwards' ball skills really popped. Obviously, the ball production, whether in college or in the NFL, has been really good. And it shows up on tape. Obviously, it's a situation where I think he anticipates the ball well. He sees it, he tracks it, and he makes very good adjustments. And he knows how to play through the hands of a receiver. So he just is very instinctive in terms of finding the football and putting himself in positions to make plays on the ball. And the stats tell the story there. And there's a pretty big sample size here that it's not coincidental. There's sometimes where the ball just kind of finds guys and they'll get some production. I think Mike Edwards positions himself well to have the consistent ball production that he's been able to enjoy throughout his career. I think Mike Edwards is a physical football player. He plays off contact well. He's never passive. You see some safeties that are reluctant and they really just want to be the last line of defense. They don't want to stick their nose in the pile. Not at all the case with Mike Edwards. He's physical, plays off contact, He has good hitting power. He's got a fairly dense frame. At the combine, he was like 5'10", 205. He's probably bulked up a little bit more than that at this point in his career. And so you can see that he's got that dense build, and he can pack a little punch as a tackler and a guy who can play off of contact. So a physical player. I think he's also a versatile player. You saw Kansas City play him in a bunch of different roles, whether that's split zone coverage, as a high post safety center fielder type guy, and as a one high guy. He'll play in the box. He'll play in man coverage. Kansas City was not shy about putting him in situations where he's one-on-one with tight ends, one-on-one with wide receivers. That happened quite a bit. And so I love the interchangeability of him. He's not a guy that can only do one thing. He can fill a bunch of roles for you that you ask a safety to fill, right? So one thing that we enjoyed so much about Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde is how interchangeable they are. I think Mike Edwards gives you a lot of that interchangeability as well. Now, when it comes to some of the warts that I saw in film, you definitely wish he was a little bit more dynamic in terms of functional athleticism. He's only a sufficient athlete. He's not a plus athlete. Now, he's not a slug. He's not a guy that his feet are stuck in the mud and he can't move, but you're not going to watch him on tape and feel like, wow, that guy's explosive. He can really, really close down distances and in a hurry. Or he's got the type of range where he can be playing on one hash and then be able to get on his horse and make a play out towards the sideline to the to the field side. That's not really his game. He's got sufficient range, but it's definitely not above average or anything like that. So you're going to wish he just was a little bit more explosive. Maybe you wish he was just a little bit more long, right? 5'10". You wish maybe there's just a little bit more in terms of physical traits, in terms of measurements, right? Just a little taller, a little longer, a little bit more explosive. I would also say that missed tackles have been a problem for Mike Edwards. I would say that in my exposures, I didn't really see any issues with it. I thought he was a good tackler from what I saw, capable of making tackles outside of his frame, wrapping up, really working towards the hips and thighs of the ball carrier and getting people on the ground. But his missed tackle numbers are pretty alarming. A 17% missed tackle rate for his NFL career, and he's never been under 15.4% in any one season. And so that's too high. And so hopefully that can be corrected. I would say the best predictor of future performance is past performance, and he's been in the league for 5 years now, and missed tackles have been an issue for 5 years. It's probably not going to go away, but you wish it would. And again, I didn't see too many issues with missed tackles from my exposures, but that data is real, and something to be mindful of with him in this defense. A defense in Buffalo that I think tackled fairly well last year, but I think historically under Sean McDermott, you've seen plenty of tackling issues. So how does Mike Edwards fit into this defense? Well, I'm assuming he's the starting safety opposite of Taylor Rapp. So there it is. Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp, they are your Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde replacements. I think that firmly puts Cam Lewis and Damar Hamlin into depth roles, which I think is appropriate for them. I think your best two safeties are pretty obviously to me Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp. I don't think this precludes the Bills from investing a draft selection in a safety. It'd be nice to get a cost control guy in the mix that has some upside that you can develop behind Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp, and think maybe in 2025 you have a starter there. So we'll still talk plenty about safety. I mean, it's only a 1-year contract as well. And maybe it's a Taylor Rapp situation where he shows the team enough where they want to commit to him beyond this season, but this season has to play out. And I could see him being kind of a mainstay for this defense. I was pretty encouraged by what I saw on film, but you want to see what he looks like for your team and before you commit long term. But again, I don't think that the arrival of Mike Edwards or the contract extension for Taylor Rapp puts safety so much on the back burner where I wouldn't be interested in the right investment at the right time. Just kind of shooting off the hip, I would say that's probably middle rounds where I would want to do it. But if you love the guy and they were available earlier, and I mean, you really love them and you felt good about some of your other positions of need, all right, I can get behind it. But I'd like to see at least one draft pick added at the safety position. I think what I'd like most about this new pair of Taylor Rapp and Mike Edwards is that you have very experienced players, guys that are entering their 6th season in the NFL. They have won 3 Super Bowls between the two of them. That's good, right? You got guys that have been to the top of the mountain. They've seen what it takes. They've been part of those football teams that have done it. That's pretty exciting. You look at both of them combined, they've played in 147 games. They have 80 starts between them, including a lot of playoff experience. And losing a veteran pair of safeties like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, even if the impact has dropped off this past season, you knew that there was just a steadiness about those guys that would be helpful. I think you look at these two guys, and boy, oh boy, I'm not saying they're Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, but I like that they have an element of experience as they become the new duo, at least for 2024. I would say, though, collectively, I wish that there was more range between them. One of the things that I had talked about with Taylor Rapp being one of the starters was really wanting to have another guy back there that can cover distance and you feel really good about as a deep post safety. And in some ways I do with Mike Edwards. I just maybe wish there was a little bit more explosiveness to his game to really cover some ground. I think it's important that he is instinctive, right? That helps him. That helps make up for maybe missing a little bit of explosiveness. Think about Jarris Byrd. Jarris Byrd is not athletic at all. Like, not even close. One of the worst athletes you'll see at the safety position. But because he was so instinctive, he was able to cover a lot of ground and make a ton of plays on the back end. And so that's important. But I think as a duo, I don't think they have that much range. And I guess you would look at Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, and neither one of them is a very dynamic athlete, right? They're good athletes. Don't get me wrong. They're very athletic dudes. But when you're talking about through the context of NFL safeties and really wanting guys that can cover distance, those guys are more instinctive, right? And that allowed them to make up for some of their athletic deficiencies. But now that they're, both into their 30s, you can tell that, there's some mileage on the tires. But obviously Edwards and Rapp aren't there. I think it's going to be smart for us to not compare Taylor Rapp and Mike Edwards to Poyer and Hyde. I mean, we're talking about a legendary safety duo in the history of the organization. These guys are going to do their own thing. They're their own players, and they got to play their style of football, and they got to play off each other. And, it's just a new era. It's just a new era of safeties in Buffalo, and we enjoyed those guys for a long time, and now it's somebody else's turn, and Mike Edwards has already shared that he's going to wear 21. So there's still going to be a 21 back there, but it won't be Jordan Poyer. It will be Mike Edwards. I hope that this conversation was helpful for you to learn about the newest Buffalo Bills safety, who he is, what he brings to the table, how he fits into the defense. And we'll see what happens the rest of the week. The Bills hosted defensive tackle Austin Johnson in for a visit. If the Bills sign him, we'll do an episode just like this, just like the one we did for Casey Tuhill as well. If not, we'll get to herd mentality. We'll get to some more draft conversation. There's plenty to talk about with this football team, and we'll be doing that for you here on this podcast. So don't miss anything. Make sure you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.